Hi, and welcome to MarylandReporter.com's weekly podcast. I'm Andy Rosen, here with editor and publisher Len Lazarick and Liam Farrell of the Annapolis Capital. We're here today to talk about some of the new laws on Maryland's books after Governor Martin O'Malley signed over 300 bills into law last week. Some of these bills got very little attention even through the legislative process, while others were big controversial issues like the sex offender reforms. Today we're going to talk about some of the things you've heard a lot about, and we're going to hear a little bit about some things that you may not know are now on Maryland's books. Liam, you had a story about the package of sex offender reforms that were passed this week. Can you just very briefly tell us what they do?
The sex offender laws, yeah, that was a big issue, obviously, because of the tragedy on the Eastern Shore with Sarah Foxwell, who police said was kidnapped and killed by a registered sex offender. These laws, some of which were proposed by Governor O'Malley, basically increase the sort of supervision that is attended to sex offenders upon their release, sometimes up to lifetime supervision. In addition, big win for Republicans was the extension of mandatory minimum sentences for some sex crimes. So that was a large public safety accomplishment that basically Republicans and Democrats can point to.
Now, Len, you were tracking the some of the other legislation that was signed into law this week. We found some things that sort of got a little discussion during the session and maybe fell off the radar. Now they're on the books. What did you see that you found interesting?
Well, what's always amazing when you look through these bill signings is all kinds of bills that nobody ever wrote about, or at least most of us never wrote about, and they're small bills. But some of the larger ones not really terribly significant, maybe, but the closed captioning bill that requires restaurants and bars that have TVs, and if somebody who's hearing impaired goes in and says, could you turn on the closed captioning, they're required to do that now. Now, the bill initially said that they were required to do that all the time. I believe that's my recollection, and there was some back and forth on that. Another one that actually got a fair amount of floor debate was the gang prosecution bill, and that was largely opposed by members of the Black Caucus in both the House and the Senate, because they say it unfairly categorizes people, that may have just a limited association with criminal activity and places them in this special category of being a gang. I'm sure if police and prosecutors try to implement this, there'll be a lot of attention paid to this by the NAACP and by the American Civil Liberties Union and things like that, because it's a pretty broad law attempting to get at the fact that it's really hard to pin down who's in a gang.
Liam, you covered this bill quite a bit, didn't you?
Yeah, gangs have been a pretty big issue, especially locally in Anne Arundel County, because of an incident where a 14-year-old kid, Christopher Jones from Crofton, was killed in what police called a gang-related incident. So that was a really high issue on the radar. For example, there was a bill signing of legislation from House Speaker Mike Bush that is meant to increase communication between schools and law enforcement. The wider gang bill that Len was talking about, the issue that they were trying to address is when Maryland first passed gang legislation, there was some trouble with proving what meant an ongoing association with a gang member. So that's kind of the issue that they were trying to fix, was whether they had put too high a bar in there so nobody could ever be proven to be part of a gang, if they left the county or they left the state for a while.
How similar
So-
is this to the federal was it FICO law that allows people to be prosecuted just for being a member or being part of a criminal organization? Is this what they're trying to get at here? Something on the state level?
Well, I mean, there are numerous steps you have to go through to actually determine that someone was a gang. So, I mean, it's not. There was criticism that a glancing association could embroil someone in a gang prosecution, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case. From my remembering of the legislation, it's more complicated than that in terms of you actually have to be actively participating in criminal activity that benefits the gang or gang members. So, I mean, if you just know somebody from the neighborhood, I don't think that's necessarily what's going to be happening. But obviously,
and there were people on the other side of this issue that said, "Well, this is a slight improvement, but it really doesn't go far enough in approaching this gang activity, in trying to control it and prosecute people for it." And it's a very good example of this attempting to balance, the general community needs without prosecuting people who just, may have made a mistake or associating with the wrong people and things like that.
And so these are important bills that affect a lot of people, but something that will affect everybody, or everybody who is caught speeding, is a bill that takes away the automatic court date for people who are given traffic citations. You have to ask for a court date. You get it if you ask for it, but it's not just automatically put on the books. This one was of interest to a lot of transportation advocates. Did you guys have any experience with this bill? What was going on with that?
Well, I actually saw a presentation about that to a local delegation. It happened to be the Howard County delegation, but the sheriff from Charles County was one of the big advocates, and former state police, and they really believe that this bill will save the counties and the state a lot of money, but by not requiring police to show up for all these cases where you go into district court and they call out the name on a traffic violation, the person is not there, they're found guilty. They pay their fine. The fact that it was automatic, that you had a court date set. In this case, now you have to request a court date if you want to challenge your traffic violation. And supposedly this will save several $1 million, but there are other people who say, no, because of the way they schedule things, it won't. But ultimately the legislature said, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do this and potentially save some money for the state and the locals.
Well, it looks like we're running out of time, guys. Thank you very much for joining us, Liam Farrell with the Annapolis Capital. All right, well, check out Hometown Annapolis every day for everything that's going on in your state capital. Len Lazarick, editor and publisher of MarylandReporter.com. Thank you so much. And I'm Andy Rosen. We'll be back again next week. Thanks again, guys.